Rowan Pike wants to marry. Rosie? That fat girl. The teacup slipped from Maggie Ellis's hand and shattered on the packed earth floor. In the kitchen doorway, Rosie froze mid-motion, her knees pressed to the wet boards as she scrubbed with a frayed brush. Dirty suds dripped down her wrists. Her cracked knuckles burned. Beatrice snorted loud enough for the neighbors outside to hear. Maybe his eyes went blind from all that ranch smoke. Lillian laughed, higher, sharper. Or maybe he feels sorry for her. Pitiful thing that she is. A pair of neighbor women glanced through the open window, whispering behind their hands. One pointed straight at Rosie's back. Maggie hissed, "If Rowan Pike wants a wife, he should take one of my proper daughters. Not her." Rosie bowed her head lower, her hair falling like a curtain to hide her face. The brush slipped. A bucket tipped, and dirty water splashed across her skirt, soaking her apron, cold and humiliating. She swallowed hard. They always talked like she wasn't there. Like she wasn't someone, like she was furniture. Behind the doorframe, her breath trembled. Why me? Why is he choosing me? And deeper, quieter, will they ever see value in me? Outside, boots crunched on gravel, the sound of neighbors gathering to gossip. Rosie whispered to herself, "Value, not pity. Value." And the question lingered in the doorway like dust motes in morning light. If a man chooses you for your worth, not your beauty, would you have the courage to believe him? Rosie packed her things in silence. A small bundle, 2 dresses, a worn shawl, and a square of linen folded with care, the only thing her father left her. She held it a moment, thumb brushing the stitched initials. His voice rose in her memory like a warm ember. "You don't have to shine, Rosie. You just have to try." 18 words that had carried her through every cruel season. She tucked the handkerchief close to her ribs and stepped into the narrow hallway. Maggie blocked the door, arms crossed. "So you're really going? Running off to be his charity project?" Rosie didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the dust swirling at her feet. Beatrice leaned against the wall, lips curled. "He'll regret it, you know. Men always wake up." Lillian added, "And when he does, don't come back here begging." Rosie lifted her chin, not high, just enough. "I'm not begging now." She slipped past them before her courage cracked. The morning sun struck her eyes as she stepped outside. Neighbors lingered by the fence, waiting to see the show. When they saw her walking toward town alone, some clicked their tongues. Some shook their heads. But one old woman, Mrs. Crane, gave her a slow, thoughtful nod. A tiny win. A small spark in a cold morning. Rosie breathed in the dry air. Her skirts felt heavy. Her heart felt heavier. What if they're right? What if he wants someone else? Someone better? But she kept walking. Because trying was all she'd ever had. And today, it would have to be enough. The Pike Ranch sat wide and quiet under the afternoon sun, red dust lifting in slow curls with every breeze. Rosie hesitated at the gate until Rowan stepped out of the barn. Tall, broad-shouldered, sunburnt, and calm in a way that made silence feel solid. He studied her, not her size, not her dress, her... Then he nodded once. "Rosie Ellis." "Yes, sir." 3 weeks, he said as they walked toward the house. "You work. You earn. You decide if this life fits you. I'll do the same. Fair? Fair? No pity." A small breath loosened in her chest. At the porch, she instinctively moved toward the side door, the one servants used back home. Rowan touched her elbow, firm but respectful. "Not that door." He opened the front one. "At this ranch," he said, steady as oak, "my wife walks through the front." The words hit her like warmth after winter. But when he pushed the door open, reality hit harder. The air didn't smell like home. It smelled of stale grease and cold ash. Piles of muddy boots blocked the hallway. The main table was buried under dusty ledgers, unwashed coffee cups, and tangled harness leather. Pots sat in the hearth, coated with old stew. A house built by a man who worked too hard to care for anything but the land. Rowan looked at the chaos, then at her. He didn't apologize. He just looked tired. 3 weeks, he repeated. Prove you belong. That's all. Rosie looked at the mess. Most women would have turned back. But she saw something else underneath the dust. A place that needed her. Value, she whispered. Not pity. Value. And for the first time, she stepped fully inside. Rosie rolled up her sleeves. The kitchen looked like a storm had passed through it. Flour spilled across the counter, jars uncapped, vegetables wilting in a corner, and a crate of bruised apples slumped beside the door. Her chest tightened. 12 men eat here, she remembered Rowan saying. 12 men. 1 dinner. And she had only hours. She tied her hair back, washed her hands, and started sorting the apples. Half were bruised, but not spoiled. She cut away the worst spots, saving every piece that could be cooked down. She found 3 onions softening at the bottom of a basket. She trimmed them too. The waste pile stayed small. The salvage bowl grew big. Don't you dare give up now, she whispered to herself. The stew simmered low, filling the room with the scent of pepper and apples melting into the broth. She kneaded dough with quick, steady movements. Her arms burned, but it was a satisfying ache. When she slid the biscuits into the oven, the last of the afternoon light brushed her cheek. By supper time, the long table filled. 12 ranch hands. Rowan standing at the head, watching. No one spoke for a moment. Then the first man took a bite. A long pause. Then a grunt. Boss? Who cooked this? Rowan nodded toward Rosie. The men dug in bowls emptied, then scraped, then set down with quiet satisfaction. Rosie's heart fluttered. They ate everything. After the meal, Rowan lifted the crate of apples she'd trimmed. His brow furrowed. You used these? Yes, Rosie said softly. Most of them were still good. Only the skins were bruised. I saved what I could. He turned the crate over in his hands. That's nearly $18 of produce the last cook would have thrown out. $18? To her, that was months of careful living. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Not the way men in town looked, mocking or pitying. This was different. Evaluating. Respecting. You worked smart, he said. Not just hard. Keep that up. Rosie felt something unfamiliar bloom inside her chest. Pride. Small, but real. The next days stretched long and hot. Rosie rose before sunrise, cooked, cleaned, learned the rhythm of the ranch. Little by little, she found her footing. But something in the air felt wrong. Too dry. Too still. One evening, as the sky bruised purple, Rowan sat on the porch, elbows on his knees, staring toward the fields. Rosie stepped lightly, unsure if she was interrupting. Is something wrong? She asked. He didn't turn. The well's running low. Lower than it should this early in the season. Rosie hesitated. She'd never heard him sound uncertain. Rowan Pike was a man built of steady lines and firm decisions. But tonight his voice cracked along the edges. This ranch is the last thing I've got, he said quietly. After she left, after everything fell apart, this land was the only thing that didn't walk away. His wife who ran off with the merchant. Rosie's throat tightened. Rowan scrubbed a hand over his jaw. If I lose the herd this year, I lose the ranch. And if I lose the ranch... He didn't finish the sentence. Rosie stood beside him, hands clasped. She wanted to say something comforting, something useful, but fear pressed against her ribs. She wasn't smart enough to fix a well, wasn't strong enough to lift fence posts. She was just Rosie. But when he finally looked up at her, His eyes softened in a way she didn't understand. "You worked wonders in that kitchen," he said. I noticed. A warmth spread through her, slow and unsure. She sat beside him, careful not to crowd his space. I'm sorry things are so heavy," she said. "I know what it's like to hold something together alone." Rowan's shoulders loosened just a little. "You're not alone here," he murmured. And for the first time, she believed him. Saturday morning brought the weekly market baskets of peaches, bolts of cloth, ranch hands trading tools, mothers shouting after children. Rosie clutched Rowan's list of supplies, her pulse fluttering. She'd never shopped for a ranch before. She stopped at a produce stand to check the price of potatoes. The vendor, Mrs. Grover, glanced up and her smile froze. Then it tilted. "Oh," the woman said loudly enough for the nearby shoppers to hear. "You're the new Pike woman." Rosie stiffened. People turned. Mrs. Grover's eyes swept over Rosie's body, slow and dripping with judgment. "Buying all this to feed yourself, dear? Or is Rowan fattening you up for winter?" A few chuckles. Heat burned up Rosie's neck. She shook her head. "I'm buying for the ranch." "For the ranch," Mrs. Grover repeated, laughing. "Well, aren't you ambitious?" Rosie tried to pay quickly, but the woman leaned closer. "You know, folks are saying Rowan only picked you because no respectable girl would have him after his wife ran off." Two broken souls under one roof. That one hit deep, too deep. Rosie's eyes blurred. But then bootsteps. A quiet shift in the crowd. Rowan's voice, steady as steel. "Who is she?" "Mrs. Grover straightened instantly. "Mr. Pike, I didn't see." Rowan stepped beside Rosie, not touching her, but close enough that she felt shielded. "You keep my wife's name out of your mouth." Gasps rippled. Rosie swallowed. "Wife?" He said it without hesitation, without shame. Mrs. Grover fumbled with the scale. "No harm meant—" Rowan's jaw flexed. "Then let it stay that way." He handed Rosie the basket himself. As they walked away, he said quietly, "You don't bow to folks who live on spite. You hear me?" Rosie nodded, though tears stung her lashes. She wasn't used to anyone standing with her. But today, she wasn't standing alone. The drought tightened its grip on Red Willow. Dust clung to every step, and the cattle bawled in low, thirsty voices. Rosie carried buckets until her arms trembled. Every morning the well sank lower. Crossing the pasture at noon, she noticed something strange, a narrow stripe of bright green cutting across dying grass. She knelt, pressed her palm into the soil. Cool. Damp. Her heartbeat kicked. Something fed this patch. She looked up toward the hill behind the barn and spotted a sagging wooden cover half buried in brush. A forgotten cistern. She dropped the laundry basket and climbed. The sun burned her shoulders, sweat stung her eyes. Halfway up, her legs shook. "Don't stop," she told herself. "Don't let them see you weak." She reached the boards and pulled. Rotten wood gave way, and a breath of cold air rose from below. "Thought that thing was dead 10 years, a voice barked. Jacob and two hands stood behind her, arms crossed. Rosie pointed at the wet soil. "It's feeding this patch. There's water. Enough to use." Jacob snorted. "Pipes are rusted. Then fix only what we need. Let it run downhill into barrels before sundown." The men exchanged looks. Doubt lingered, but the green grass didn't lie. Rowan arrived moments later. He took in the scene, the glimmer of water, Rosie's shaking hands. "You climbed up here alone?" "Yes," she panted. "I had to be sure." His eyes softened. "All right, let's get it moving." By sunset, patched pipes dripped steady water into barrels. Slow, but life-saving. Rowan stood beside her. "Rosie, you just bought this ranch time." For the first time, she let herself smile. 2 days later, a wagon rattled up the road. Rosie's stomach dropped the moment she saw who stepped down. Maggie. Beatrice? Lillian? Her mother didn't even look around. So this is where you've been hiding. Beatrice lifted a folded paper. We found the account you ran up at 13. Cloth and sugar. $12 then. $120 now. Rosie blinked. I never signed anything. I signed for you, Maggie snapped. As your mother. You'll pay it now. Nearby ranch hands stopped working. Jacob drifted closer, wiping sweat with his sleeve. Beatrice smirked. You think you're important here? Because he lets you stir his pots? You owe us. You always have. Rosie opened her mouth, but no sound came. Then Rowan's voice cut through the yard. Enough. He stood beside Rosie, jaw tight. You don't get to walk onto my land and talk to my wife like that. Maggie laughed. Then you pay the debt. You've got coin. All eyes turned to Rosie. Slowly, she reached into her apron and drew out her little cloth pouch, her wages, saved penny by penny. She counted out bills. $50. Gasps broke through the crowd. She held the money forward with steady hands. Here, $50. Take it. Not because I owe you, her voice rose, stronger, but because I am buying my freedom. Beatrice's smirk died. Maggie staggered back. For a long moment, no one spoke. Rosie finally breathed. Maggie pushed the money away. 50 doesn't cover interest. It covers everything I ever owed you, Rosie said. And more, Beatrice hissed. You ungrateful cow. No, Rosie said, voice firm. I'm not ungrateful. I'm done. Her hands shook, but her spine stayed straight. I'm not your burden. I'm not your shame. And I'm not coming back. The words fell heavy across the yard. Even the cattle quieted. Rowan stepped closer, not in front of her, but beside her. This woman saved $18 of food in one night, he said evenly. She found the only working water on this land. She kept Red Willow alive. He met Maggie's eyes. I won't let you use her again. Maggie sputtered. You'll regret choosing her. Rosie lifted her chin. That's his choice. And mine. Beatrice climbed into the wagon, face twisted. Lillian followed, eyes darting away from Rosie's. The wagon rolled off, dust trailing behind. When the last wheel disappeared, Rosie let out a breath she hadn't known she held. Her hand went to the handkerchief in her pocket, her father's crooked stitching brushing her fingers. Hands that worked. Hands that mattered. Rowan turned to her, voice low. Rosie. You stood tall. She wiped her cheeks. For the first time. I felt tall. Rowan nodded once. Good. Because you are. And for the first time in her life, she believed him. That evening, the sky burned orange over Red Willow. Workers drifted home, the dust settling into long, quiet shadows. Rosie stood by the fence, arms folded tight across her chest. The confrontation replayed in her mind, the money, the voices, her own trembling words. Rowan walked toward her, slow and steady. You holding up? She nodded, though her eyes were red. I thought, when they came, I'd fall apart. You didn't, he said. You stood, Rosie swallowed. But I felt sick, like I'd break in half. Strength isn't the lack of fear, Rowan answered. It's carrying your fear and moving anyway. Wind brushed the grass. Rosie stared out across the ranch. When I was a girl, Mama told me I'd never be more than a mouth to feed. Maybe I believed her too long. Rowan turned fully toward her. Rosie Ellis. You saved this place. I meant what I said. She hesitated. What if I fail next time? What if I'm not enough? His voice lowered. Then we fail together. But you won't be alone. A lump rose in her throat. No one had ever said those words to her. Then Jacob hurried toward them. Boss, he called. The south trough's dry again. Cattle are crowding the fence. Rosie straightened. The new barrels are full. If we move the herd in sections, we can stretch water until the creek rises. Rowan asked. You sure? She nodded. I can show you. He didn't question her, didn't doubt, then lead the way. And just like that, Rosie did. For the first time, the ranch followed her. By noon the next day, word had already spread across the valley. Red Willow had water again, and the woman who found it wasn't the rancher. It was Rosie. Workers from neighboring homesteads stopped by to check the barrels and patched pipe. Some looked skeptical, until they saw the water running downhill exactly as she'd planned. Smart girl, one rancher muttered. Didn't think Pike had it in him to hire someone like her. Rowan replied simply, he didn't hire her. He listens to her. At lunch, Rosie stepped out of the kitchen wiping her hands. She was startled to find everyone waiting in the yard. Rowan, Jacob, the Hands, even old Martha from the neighboring farm. Rowan held a small metal key in his hand. Come here, Rosie. Her breath caught. This, he said, lifting the key so sunlight hit it, is the storeroom key. My father carried it. Then I did. He paused. But you're the one who's kept this ranch standing. Gasps slid through the crowd. He placed the key in her palm. From today on, you run supplies. You approve what comes in and goes out. Equal say. Equal share. Rosie stood frozen. Her fingers curled around the metal, cool, solid, real. In her pocket, her father's handkerchief brushed her wrist. His voice echoed in memory. You don't have to shine. Just try. Tears blurred her sight. Rowan? Why me? He answered without hesitation. Because you see what matters. Because you work harder than anyone here. Because you saved us when I couldn't. The workers nodded. One even tipped his hat. Rosie lifted her chin, tears slipping freely. I'll do it, she whispered. I'll do all of it. Red Willow had never felt more like hers. At sunset, the ranch glowed gold. Barrels brimmed with water. Cattle grazed in peace. Workers laughed as they headed home. Everything looked alive again. Rosie and Rowan stood by the freshly repaired fence. She leaned her arms on the rail, watching the light dance across the field. This land looks different, she said softly. Rowan shook his head. Land's the same. You're different. She flushed. I just worked. You led, he corrected. They followed you today. Rosie looked away, overcome. I didn't think anyone would ever follow me. They will? Rowan's voice was gentle but firm. They already have. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Rosie exhaled. Do you regret choosing me? Rowan turned sharply. Rosie, listen to me. He stepped closer, eyes steady. I didn't choose you because you were beautiful, though you are. I chose you because you're good. Because you're steady. Because this ranch stands when you stand. Her heart throbbed. And if it falls, then we rebuild, he said. Together. A breeze lifted her hair. For the first time in her life, she felt enough. Then, in the distance, a small carriage approached. Elegant, polished, out of place against the dusty trail. Rosie frowned. Expecting someone? Rowan's jaw tightened. No. The carriage slowed at the gate. A woman stepped down, tall, lovely, wrapped in traveling silk. Her eyes scanned the ranch like she already owned it. Rosie's breath stilled. Rowan whispered, almost too low to hear. My wife? My first wife. Rosie swallowed. But she didn't shrink. Not this time. She squared her shoulders. She was Rosie Ellis of Red Willow now. And she was ready. Rosie thought she had finally found her peace. But the look on that silk-clad woman's face said everything was only beginning. What waits for Rosie now? If you'd like to continue this journey, let me know in the comments. And thank you for listening.